if you look at Pressbooks book includes all of the kind of base template that are used for other Pressbooks themes. And there's two particular kind of components to Pressbooks book that are important to know about. One of them is called Buckram and the other is called Etna. Each of these have their own documentation pages. So if you want to know what's in Buckram, it's a set of variables that are all defined here and it explains what they are. So there's some docs available for all of the Buckram variables.
Basically, the goal with Buckram was to take all of the different chunks of styles for various parts of a book and create a sort of abstract with good sensible defaults that could be used to build any themes. So we were kind of looking at it in the context of like something like Bootstrap or Bulma or one of these other front-end CSS frameworks, but for styling the content of a book. So Buckram is in Pressbooks book as a package. So it's managed as a mono repo using Lerna, which is a whole other conversation unto itself. But basically what Buckram includes is this set of styles. So there's some editor specific styles, which make sure that these book styles appear properly within the tiny MCE editor that's used in WordPress. There are the two things where most of this happens are the variables and the components. The Buckram main file just gives a version in a format that can be parsed out so that we can detect what version of Buckram is being run. In each of these components, we have one sort of main file that imports all of the other partials. So page structure as an example, we've got general page structure, we've got the recto verso for the left and right pages, page numbering, running content and content string. So for example, if you want to have the title of your chapter appear at the top of the page or the bottom of the page. And this uses this sort of special markup for comments from this SassDoc project, which is the documentation site that Steele just shared, is generated using SassDoc. It's one of a number of systems for documenting Sass variables. There's some other ones, but this one seemed to be the best and most comprehensive one at the time. And so we used it for documenting the content in here. So let's just go into that structure, for example. If we look at recto verso, we'll see that there's some rules here. So in a chapter, we set page break before to whatever the value of this variable is. If a chapter follows another, we may have a different one. So we have a section opening versus first section opening. And then those variables will be found in variables structure. This shows all of the possible options that you can use. The ones that are commented out are just for assistance with some of these kind of more perplexing ones that are around CSS paged media. Paged media is a whole other thing that's worth looking into because that's how prints works. So if you want to know how to style a PDF for print, paged media is a non-finalized extension to the CSS specification that gives you @rules for things like pages and running content and footers and headers and those sorts of things. All of these are set using a default flag. And so the simplest way of showing how Buckram works is I'm going to use this little tool called Sassmeister, which is a great little playground for showing what Sass compiles into in terms of CSS. Here I've set a variable to 2ems and I've given it the default flag. Now, if I were to remove this flag just for argument's sake, I could go down, I could redefine indent to 3em, and it wouldn't do anything because the way Sass compiles, it's top to bottom. And so in order for us to let these values be overridden in themes that use Buckram, what we do is we add that default flag. And then, now let's see, if I do this again, well, it's still not going to change anything. That's because the way the default flag variables get overridden in Sass is above. So now you can see I've been able to override that default value. And so that's why when you look at a theme that's made with Buckram, So let's look at Clark again. Let's go into structure. What I've done here is imported the variables from Buckram and imported the components from Buckram. And then I've overridden all the variables above. And I've added the default flag to these again, so that any of these that are overridden further by theme options, the theme options variables can be inserted above these. So it's sort of a cascading override situation. The default value from Buckram is in these variables and is set with the default flag. The themes customizations are also set with the default flag coming before the original variables, which overrides them. And then any custom styles that are applied through the book theme options will appear before these in the rendered style sheet, which will override them once more. So a lot of the internal stuff in both the book themes and Buckram depends on Sass, and Pressbooks internally uses a PHP Sass compiler called SCSS PHP to compile Sass style sheets based on the variables that are supplied by users through theme options. That was actually the only option at the time, but now in 2021, CSS custom properties are much more widely used. They're supported by Prints, which is what Pressbooks uses to generate PDFs. And they're also supported in a lot of ebook reading systems. I think a lot of overhead could be removed from the book theming system by migrating away from using Sass to using CSS with custom properties natively. I mean, the same thing can be done with CSS custom properties like this. So say we wanted to set a font family. So what this does is if the custom font variable is set, which could be done using, say root element. So that's the HTML element. So if I do that, this paragraph will be in Comic Sans, but if I delete that, it tries to find a custom font and then just falls back to Times New Roman. And that happens in the browser. And it also works now in what Pressbooks uses to generate PDFs. And it works in most modern reading systems, whether that's Kindle or other EPUB readers. So if there's any space in the roadmap for making that architectural change, this is the kind of thing that I could have only dreamed of being able to do when we first built this theming system. And it's the kind of thing that would make the whole process a lot more efficient.